Sports, I would say definitely, specifically football for me, obviously, really did impact me wanting to do a podcast. You can't tell me the conversations you had on like a 6-hour bus drive to an away
Yo,
game shouldn't have been
the
recorded.
locker room was nuts.
And one of my buddies, he's just like, if in 50 years we have this Instagram page to look
Yes.
back on, it's still worth it. To look back at when we were in our mid-20s just joking around, that's still worth it. Nick Voci played football at York University. You're watching Undress the Jersey.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Undress the Jersey. Today we're joined by Nick Voci. Happy to come on to have you on here. I reached out to you because I was doing some late night scrolling on TikTok. Came across your podcast video about your buddy or your boy running into Chromas at the gas station, and she was acting nuts. See, like that just there, like just proves, like TikTok or social media, like just putting out content. You never know who you could watch, who can hear your story. Like so just like start this off by giving us a little bit of intro about who you are, and if you want to jump on that story, go for it.
Okay, so so like I said, with my little name and York football, I played football at York University. I majored in psychology, and I finished my career there in 2019, so just over a year ago, or around a year ago now, like exactly. And I always had this passion for photography and like just making videos of like family vacations and stuff. And from there, right when I was done, I bought a camera just to kind of jump back into it. And I didn't even think of getting into podcasting or anything like that, but it kind of just turned into like, you're having one of those conversations with your boys that's just hilarious, and we should record this. And
100%.
That's what we did. We got the Yeti, and actually, funny enough, the first time we recorded was my DSLR with a shotgun mic, and the audio was terrible, but we just had such a great time. And from there, we just leveled up to the Yeti mic, and then from there, we got a whole setup now with a mic each and all that kind of stuff. And now I just have a podcast with my buddies that's doing pretty well so far. And that Chromas story was one that recently kind of blew up a little bit.
Well, because it's so like she's like my demographic so far has been anywhere from like a high school kid to my friends that I played sports with at school, and then even some like parents or former like coaches or whatever. And just for context, like Chromas was what? Like I'm not even sure if I know, because I'm from out east. And I only know her through Six Buzz TV for just being like one of these like loud personalities in the hip hop rap culture.
Yeah. And you know what? Me too. I remember seeing her a couple times on Six Buzz, and not really thinking anything of it. I've never been the type of guy to even follow people like Logan Paul or like those big YouTubers.
Sure.
So I was never into it. But then obviously, like you said, you know who she is. You hear the name enough times. And my buddy comes on the show just because I heard he has like a bunch of stories he should be on the podcast, and it'd be great. And he has the one about Chromas.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't Chromas, that story is hilarious.
It's hilarious. He said, "Come clean my car," or something.
Who says that?
Hey, clean my car. Like that to me just shows that her personality of being like, yo, I deserve everything. But I guess that low key like plays into the lifestyle that she's living. Like she wants to be in this party celebrity, but like Kardashian, whatever. Let's dive into your podcast, because obviously, like, yes, this is a sports, like my whole, like, this is an athlete platform. And it might be weird where someone's go like, okay, like isn't this supposed to be a sports specific platform? Yet here we are talking about like podcasting. But this is even the first time I'm thinking about it, but this is a platform for the stories of athletes. Like, so like what you're currently doing now with podcasting is a part of who you are. And yes, I want to get into all of like the lessons and stuff that you use day to day that might have been learned from football. Mm-hmm. But a little side story here. I remember this past summer, I had someone on the show who, his name's Max Emerson Taylor, and he recently just blew up over the quarantine on TikTok
Yeah, I know who he is.
Do you?
Yeah.
So that's hilarious. So he's from Halifax. I met him through a friend of a friend back in, let's say, 2016, 2017. So
Okay.
TikTok's not even existent. I met like,
Yeah.
he's just a guy that went to high school in the city with one of my friends. Met him. He was a cool guy, like super nice. And then fast forward to last summer, like he's getting shout outs from David Dobrik, Addison Ray, the biggest names on TikTok, and he's doing
Wow.
like he's blowing up. And then so naturally, I was like, yo, come on the show. Actually, he reached out to me. He was like, hey man, love what you're doing. Like, if you ever need a guest, like I'm down to do a little podcast. And I was like, hell yeah, because one, you have a ton of attention right now. But on top of that, before this, he studied sports marketing, and he wanted to come up with a sports blog and page, and so it all tied together. But what I'm trying to get at here is like, I had some feedback where someone was like, yo, I thought this was a pod, like a platform for athletes. This guy's not an athlete. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And whether or not it was a joke, maybe it was his friends being like, trying to be like dry humor stuff, like that stuck out to me, because I think sports affects everyone in a different way, and somehow we're all affected by sports. So long way to get there, but like tell us about tell people about your podcast and how it started.
Well, actually, yeah, like sports, I would say definitely, specifically football for me, obviously, really did impact me wanting to do a podcast. And like I said, it's kind of the style of it is like you're joking around with your buddies, you're laughing about anything, a funny story, whatever it is. And football for me was the thing I loved most about football, and I'm sure you did with basketball too, was the brotherhood that you make with your teammates.
100%.
You can't tell me the conversations you had on like a 6-hour bus drive to an away
Yo,
game shouldn't have been
the
recorded.
locker room was nuts.
Exactly, and I remember even one of my coaches on the away games, we had a couple games where we had to drive out to Ottawa or to to Kingston, and everybody would just gravitate to him and just want to hear stories about his
Mm,
time in the NFL
mm.
or the CFL. And that's kind of what made me think like a podcast about maybe not sports related, but those stories that you hear when you're joking around with the guys, I could listen to those all day, and that's kind
100%.
of what it is. But in terms of like even more so from football, I think football also gave me the confidence to kind of put myself out there with podcasting, where I also kind of like how a lot of people don't think that athletes are very well-spoken people,
Right.
but as soon as you get on a team, we are. And especially ones that competed at the university level, we're very, very well educated, very well spoken, because we have to be to stay in that sport.
I would even argue it's more of a like, we're great communicators. Like,
Yeah.
sure, not, and we know those teammates that can't write their or spell their own name,
Yeah.
but we have this certain sense of like, reading energy off of each other, and I think that's huge in the world of communication. Like how do you feel? This is something I was thinking about all day. I'm like, I don't know this guy. This guy doesn't know me, and he's like, I randomly reached out to him saying, yo, you want to come on a podcast? And a lot of people would be like, what, you want to come, like, just jump on this call? I'm going to record it. We're going to talk for about 40
Yeah.
minutes about what? We have no idea. How, like, what made you say yes? Yes, I know you run your own podcast, but it's completely different when you're sitting in the seat that I'm sitting in.
For me, I'm very much an extrovert. So with like COVID shutting everything down, I can't go to like bars to meet people.
Yeah.
As soon as a random person hits me up like, hey, like let's have a conversation. We don't know each other. I'm like, I'm drawn to that. Like I love meeting
Nice one.
people. So right away, like I'm down,
Nice one.
But I mean, just honestly, like, because I have a podcast, because I'm trying to build something myself, like also just like kind of respect too, like it
Great.
takes balls, sorry if I'm not supposed to swear, to reach out to
No,
somebody just cold, like you said, no relationship, never met. Like that takes guts, like I respect that, and I'm honored too, like you like my content, like I appreciate that.
Well, it's also like you have a sense of what it's like to run a podcast, so like what the work that goes into editing these things and
Yeah.
coordinating these things, and then you know the actual conversation of it isn't easy itself. Like you have to, like, in the back of your mind, you're like, damn, like this needs to be a little bit of entertainment.
Hmm.
um um do you worry at all, like, with these certain conversations? Because I listened to a little bit of the first episode on YouTube. For one, how come you're not on Spotify or Apple Music?
We are on Spotify.
Are you on Spotify? You're
We're on
not. You're,
Spotify,
you're not
not
on
on
Apple
Apple
Podcasts.
Music.
You know,
No,
Apple Podcast.
no.
I'm an Apple guy. I'll die on the throne of Apple Music.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, so at least I found you on YouTube. But uh, yeah, you're the first episode. You guys are talking about parties in Dominican or Punta Cana or Jamaica, twerking. Getting punched in the face, being drunk, all this kind of stuff. Do you,
Yeah.
like, locker room talk?
Yeah.
Do you worry about some of that content going out there, especially in this PC 2020 age?
I mean, yes, and I do edit some stuff out.
Okay, good,
So
good.
you did not hear the worst of the
Sure,
conversation. It's specifically in that first episode, there was some stuff that, like, we were drinking, we were having a couple shots just to stay loose, and there was a
sure.
bunch that I cut out at the end just because it was getting too rough.
Yeah, there was talk
Um,
about placenta
yeah,
and all that kind of the
it
pepperoni
was
stuff. Yeah, that's,
yeah, it was starting to get off the rails a little bit. But yeah, so I am a little bit worried about it, but I mean, I'm really into stand-up comedy. I love listening to
mm,
comedy podcasts, and I know that I don't know if you know stand-up comedy and comedians, but Joey Diaz, he was in The
yeah,
Longest
love it,
Yard.
love
One
it.
thing that he said that stuck out to me about podcasts was the point of it. The people that listen to it, you want to be like that fly on the wall. You kind of want to hear what shouldn't be
Mm,
said in the media and kind of what people are biting their tongue about. You want to hear those kind of edgy jokes. So again, yeah, I would never say something that would get me canceled or anything. Obviously not,
sure.
but I kind of like like pushing the line a little bit.
That's why I don't even like calling these things interviews, because an interview to me is too formal and too cookie
Yeah,
cutter. And like, my favorite like recordings or conversations are when I can be myself and I can have this certain sense of energy. I've
yeah,
had I've had times where I've come on here and the other person is so, like, stiff, and they're so like, man, like, is this a new, it almost feels like the time in high school where a local newspaper would interview, or even in university a local paper wants to ask you these questions, and it's just so generic, and like there's
yeah,
no dialogue
yeah.
or emotion. So I definitely respect that. You guys don't have that sort of filter, because you're right, it does give the listener an inside view. But obviously someone's going to get upset over it. Like, someone's going to hear a clip and be like, yo, fuck these guys.
Yeah. I mean,
Ooh,
you could say that about anything though,
a
and
hundred,
I think
a
I
hundred
think
percent.
there's it's yeah, someone's gonna get offended over anything. I'm not making the content for anyone either. I'm making it for myself. Like if I can
Right.
look back, it's funny. We had like 30 followers on the page for a while, and COVID hit. We couldn't get together to record, and like
Mhm.
I kind of thought it was gonna fail. And one of my buddies, he's just like, if in 50 years we have this Instagram page to look
Yes.
back on, it's still worth it. To look back at when we were in our mid-20s just joking around, that's still worth it.
Well, that's where too many people be like, yo, I'm starting a podcast, or I'm starting a brand, or I'm starting something. I'm starting an Instagram page with the intention that in 3 months that they're going to have 4,000, 5,000 followers and brand
Yeah.
deals and sponsors. Like, that's just not reality. It's not.
Yeah. No, not at all.
Like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying that can't be a goal of yours, but like, if that's the only reason you're starting it, that you're just not going to fail. So already I can see that you have a certain level of foundation, because you're like, for one, you have a reason for why you started it. You're like, I remember having these conversations on the bus or in the locker room. I'm like, damn, I wish these were recorded. And
Yeah.
literally that's what you're doing.
Mhm.
Um, who runs this podcast with you? You have, like, on your Instagram page, you have like 6, 7 names.
So right now there is 5 of us, and it's just the core guys that are on it, the original guys. And then my brother also helps out a lot. He's really great with like editing, and I had to learn how to use Adobe Premiere to edit
Yep.
stuff, and he showed me how to do all that. So he's
Yep.
not a part of it, but he helps out more than anybody else.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's just like some of my closest friends, and then the guy Daniel that told the Chromos story.
Yeah.
He's a friend of a friend who I now have gotten close with. Who he has so many stories and wanted to be a part of it. I'm like, dude, yeah, you're on, like 100%.
Well, in your bio, you have stories over standards.
Yeah.
Like where, like, explain what that means.
um, Sometimes we're out in public doing just, uh, we could be at a
Okay, I
mall.
got it. I
We
got
could be,
it.
and it's not even like something really bad, but sometimes it's like anything that you would do where it's like go do this, like bet,
Mhm.
like just like I dare you to whatever. If you're saying no and it's really not that big a deal, like would you
Because
rather go home?
it goes against who I am or the standards for myself.
Yeah, or like, oh, I don't feel like it. Like this night could be so much funnier. We at least have a story if you do it. Like just, making the most of opportunities when they come up. Like that's kind of just where it came from. So yeah.
It's something I heard at university. I went to St. FX, and definitely during my time, it was known for one of the craziest party schools. Even though I know people in Ontario, like Western, say no,
Mhm.
Western, no, the big schools. But the reason that St. FX was so special was because it's such a small town, and all the school was 5,000 kids, and at least half, even closer to three quarters, would party every weekend. But there were only two bars in the whole town, so everyone was
Yeah,
going to the same spot. So
yeah,
you knew if this girl that you were talking to, or this friend, like, you knew she was going to be there that night. So it was a special atmosphere. But definitely in my first year, my seniors on the team, they were like, "Bro, welcome to X. Like, you have to remember this motto for the story, even if you don't feel
yeah,
like doing it, or
yeah,
like you're gonna want these stories, just like you said, you're gonna want this Instagram page in 20 years. You're like, that's what you're gonna remember. Like,
hmm
I don't remember all the times I went to, I don't know, like, just think of something generic, like I don't know, like classes, or like, you don't remember like the routine things and stuff, but you do remember the things that were like, whoa, that was fucking nuts.
yeah,
Like that,
exactly,
like
yeah,
Sunday morning.
yeah.
So let's touch on football here. I'll be the first one to say, like, I don't know anything about football. Like, I can watch a game and understand how it works, but I don't. In the last episode, I did one of my friends who played football for X, um, and I was like, man, you're a DB, you're a defensive back. Like, I don't know what that means. Like,
Yeah.
so what position did you play? And let's take us all the way back to the origin story. Why football? How did you get into football?
I got into football when I was 16. I'm Italian. I grew up playing soccer, as every Italian kid probably does. And at one point, I was just kind of like getting yellow cards from hitting people too hard, and like I
Okay.
was just competing for the ball. It was just getting too physical, and I was starting to get frustrated with the game. And it timed up well. Where I think it was my first day of high school. The vice principal came up to me and my brother, who were the same size. He's like, "Do you guys play football?" We're like, "No." He's like, "You're
Mm,
you're big. You should." And we didn't play in grade 9 because we were too late for the tryout, which happened over the summer. And our high school team went to the championship. The whole school went to go watch. We fell in love with it, and then we joined
yeah.
the next year. And then from there, we just stuck with it. Um,
So quickly, like, originally from Toronto.
I grew up in Mississauga. Yeah,
Okay, Mississauga, born and raised. Uh,
Mississauga.
Parents from here, or parents are Italian from
My
Italy?
parents were born here, but their parents were born in Italy.
Okay.
So yeah, they yeah.
I had a teammate at X. He's from New York City, but his family's straight Italian, and we would always joke with him because his dad owns his own sanitation business, and we're like, man, you're definitely in the mob. Like,
Yeah.
there's no way. And he'd be like, but I just bring him up because he, like, his grandmother's from, like, from Italy, and like the meals that they would make, and like, this guy would take all shots of olive oil and be like, "Yo, what are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I'm Italian. I'm Italian." So
Yeah.
shout out Brandon. Are like, does your family still run deep with like Italy tradition and food and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. We make our own tomato sauce. We make our own like supersata and like prosciutto. We do all that kind of stuff. So we're very Italian. Actually, it's funny. I remember in my third year of university football, I was playing receiver, and my coach wanted me to transition to play tight end fullback. So I had to gain some weight. And I remember at the year end meeting after the season, the talk we had about me switching positions is like, hey, I'm gonna need you to gain some weight. And I was like, dude, no problem.
Easy. Yeah,
No
I
problem.
want to.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm also someone who looks at food and gains weight. Like I have no problem. Like I loved working out, and fitness is something that's always going to stick with me, which I developed through basketball. But yeah, man,
Yeah.
like for me, it's like some people have difficulty bulking up and put on muscle. I'll look at food and gain weight. So
Yeah.
you know, it's a blessing and a curse because it's really hard to like chop down. But
Yeah.
you know, I was on York University football page and I was looking at like the roster and stuff, and they have you down from 2013, 2015, 2016, 2017 as a first year,
Yep.
and then 2018, 2019 second and third year.
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
So I did not dress my first few years, and it goes by eligibility, not like your education.
Okay.
So my first few years, I played tight end in high school.
Yeah.
It was just a bit of bad luck. I got recruited as a tight end from Coach Michael Falds, who was the offensive coordinator at the time. He recruited me as a tight end, which if if you don't know the positions that well, that's like what Gronkowski or like
Okay.
Travis Kelce plays.
Yeah.
So that bigger body type. 2 weeks after I signed my letter of intent, he takes the head coaching job at Laurier, and they bring in a new offensive coordinator.
And this happens so often with athletes.
Yeah. So the plan for me wasn't tight end anymore. It was you need to lose weight and play receiver. And
is that because of the new coach looking at you and be like, I need you to be a receiver, not tight end, or that's personal decision?
it was the coach, not specifically me, but in Canadian football, we don't really like you don't really use a tight end that often. You'll have that guy who's a thicker dude, like a fullback, who will play a lot of special teams, but you don't really use a tight end. It's a big field. You want the fastest guys.
Gotcha.
So they just didn't have one in the system. And I'm not going to switch to running back or to defense. That's just too far out of my element to be successful. So I switched to receiver, and I spent time trying to lose weight, trying to get fast and just kind of catching up like that. It made things difficult. And then once I started competing for a receiver spot, we got a new offensive coordinator. He's like, I need you to gain weight to go back to tight end. And that's when I started getting on the field and actually dressing for games.
Okay, so that's where you fit. That's where you
Yes.
fit in football.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that was just there's a lot of other like factors that we could get into, but that would make this podcast like 3 hours.
Sure. Here we are, and other students who don't understand that system of who dresses and who doesn't. Someone's probably going to look at you and be like, "Yo, this guy sucks. He doesn't even dress."
Yeah.
What's your perspective on that whole thing? How does that make you feel? What's going through your head?
Well, funny enough, we were talking about the reason I started the podcast and how I went into it with like, I'm doing this for myself. I think I learned that from those first few years that I didn't play, because if I went into it like I'm going into university football to be a star, to make it to the league, then like I probably would have quit after not playing. But I got into it because I love the game and I was doing it for the love of the game. So those first few years, I mean, I'm in school anyway. If I loved the game enough, which I did, I stuck with it. And lucky enough, it turned out to be a spot on the team and actually dressing. But yeah, if I didn't love the game, that would have been awful. And people looking in, if, like you said, 15 people on a basketball team, 12 of you dress, even if you're one of those 3 guys who doesn't dress, like, if you don't play basketball, you're kind of talking shit like, oh, this guy doesn't dress. Like 1v1 anybody, you're getting
100%, 100%. Because you still have to be good enough to produce in practice, like provide value for the other guys in practice. But I think that case for football?
It is, and I think something that people really forget about football as well is when you're like you play once a week in football. It's a little bit different for other sports. You play once a week in football. You compete against these other guys that you don't know. Every other time you step on the field for practice, you're going against your teammates.
Sure.
Even though my first few years and a lot of players, even though you're not dressing, the guys that are dressing are going to get better because I push them in practice. So the
Mm-hmm.
better the practice squad is, the better those non-dress guys are, the
Mm-hmm.
better the dress guys are going to be.
That's right.
So you still have some kind of like pride, something to train and play for because you're pushing your teammates to get better,
But
you know?
but how do you tell someone who's a selfish, oh, this is shitty, I'm better than that player, so I'm not gonna try hard because fuck the coach and he doesn't see who I am. Like I can already tell you have the correct, like you said, you respect the game and the game's gonna respect you back. What about the guys that like don't respect the game and they think they're all that in a big bag of chips, and so they like, what happens then? You have an asshole
S
per teammate.
Specifically with York football, those guys quit.
Hmm.
And,
Why is that? Because training is nuts.
um,
Because a lot of times, a lot of like in my experience, if you were on a team that the coach just ran your ass all practice long, eventually the guys that don't play and know they are not going to play, they're going to be like, this I hate running. Why am I here? Is
yeah, and
that the case
it's
with
it's
New York?
it's it's partly that, yeah, for sure. But then there was also those guys that they would do the training. They were definitely in shape. The running, the lifting wasn't a factor. They just truly felt like I'm better than this guy.
Mm,
He's playing over me, like I'm out. And a lot of them would transfer and go to a different team. They'd go
mm,
play at Guelph, you know. Um, Sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't.
sure.
But it was, yeah, that's kind of how that shakes out. Like if you think that this isn't worth it, like you either quit or you transfer or
Did transferring ever come into your mind?
yeah. Specifically in my first few years when I
Right.
wasn't playing and the guy that had recruited me left, I was thinking like maybe I should just go to Laurier, but
Sure.
but I mean then you're kind of just starting from the bottom anyway because you got to like make your way through that team.
Right. Exactly. Which is something that always like with my friends when they're like, "Oh, I'm going to transfer because." Wait, you went? Yeah, you went to York. Did you know any of the guys on the football team? Because one of my former teammates, Nick Russell, he transferred to York. He was playing York. Tall. He's got like a little bird face. He's tall, skinny, light skinned guy.
Um
Maybe not. He would be. Yeah, he's probably my age, 20, 23, 20, 22.
um
Anyway,
unless
I remember,
I'm probably better with the face. If I saw him I'd probably recognize
sure.
him.
Anyway, he was someone who transferred, and if he had stayed one more year, Nick, I love you. If he had stayed one more year, he would have had a spot because guys would have graduated.
Yeah.
He would have like a spot. But by him having a transfer, now he's in a whole different program. He's in a whole different province. He's different teammates. He has to adjust especially when he already put in 2 years at a school.
Mhm.
So like yeah, you understood that.
Yeah. And I mean and this is something that people don't realize unless you're an athlete. When you do switch schools, regardless of, I'm sure it's the same for any sport, but
Mm,
with football, they teach things a different way, even just at your position. So, something like when you're running routes as a receiver, one school will teach something called a zone cut. Another school might teach something called a speed cut.
mm-hmm.
And if you go into that one school doing the other school's method, now you're even further removed from playing because you have to do it their way.
Right.
So there's a lot of factors that held me back from making that trend, just wanting to switch to a different school.
That's right.
But yeah,
You're graduated now, are you?
yeah, I graduated already. Yeah,
And what did you graduate with?
I majored in psychology.
Okay, which makes sense. I mean, that's something that I minored in psychology. I graduated marketing, but
Mhm.
um, like I just love people and I love stories and I love storytelling and I love perspective and I love, like me, I'm sitting here trying to get an inside perspective on how you view things. Like,
Mhm.
and I can already tell we align on a lot of things, but what I want to stay on uh like Western, or sorry, not Western, York and football. What's your relationship with the grind that comes with sports? So like, especially as someone who's not even dressing and not even seeing the field, like
Mhm.
talk to me with your relationship between the grind and the time management. And you see all these videos on TikTok and Instagram of the day in the life of a university athlete.
Yeah.
Where do you fit? Like, do you love that? Does that fire you up with having so much on your plate?
Yes and no. I mean, you do love the process. You love being a part of something like that.
Mhm.
Living at York, you live with your teammates. You get
That's
up
right.
together, you travel to the stadium, to the gym together. It's great being a part of that process, but nobody loves being in pain after a heavy leg
Yeah,
day. So there were tough times, but yeah, I did love the process. Everything about it made it worth it. Like going through a couple years of not playing and working out nonstop, 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 when I did finally dress, when I finally made a catch, when I finally made a tackle in a real game, it made it feel that much better. So it sucks, but it also really pays off. If I didn't try hard, if I didn't go through the grind, that those moments wouldn't have felt as great in
no,
my
and that's the thing with everything. Like, I always think of back to the whole Instagram followers and whatever. Like, if I could offer you 35,000 followers on your, or 200,000 followers, boom, just like that. Yeah, you want it, but like, isn't the fun part seeing if you can actually get there organically? Like,
Yeah, and that's actually something I I talked to a buddy of mine about for Instagram. I remember asking him like his page grew super quickly, and I said like, how did you grow so fast? And he told me a couple of his methods of getting there. But one of the things he said was you go on. So I have a comedy podcast. You go on the podcast that I'm not trying to emulate, but the best in comedy
yep,
podcast. You
yep.
go follow all their followers, see who follows back,
Mm,
and some of them stick, some of them don't. I thought about it, but I'd rather just like the followers that find me, the followers that see my content and they liked it on their own.
that's right.
I would rather get 1,000 followers that I earned
That's
than
right.
5,000 that are ghost followers that they like. Yeah, sure, I'll follow back,
Yeah,
and
they just followed back because they followed you, but they're not active. Like,
exactly.
I know a couple of people like that, and it's just like that can get you so like that makes you look credible. That makes you. I'm starting to post more on everywhere. I'm starting to post like me personally, Tristan, and if I have a thought while I'm making eggs, I'm gonna post something somewhere. And somewhere I've been finding a ton of traction is LinkedIn. Um, and I wrote something the other day that said, I remember in high school when Instagram was like, Instagram was the platform, and especially for high school, university kids.
Hmm.
I remember being so obsessed with my follower to following ratio, and if
Yeah,
the wider that could be, the cooler you were, and
yeah.
it kind of verified you in a sense. Or whenever you would like find a girl, or and then be like, "Yo, what's your IG?" And then she's got like 6,000
Yeah,
followers. You're like, "Man,
yeah,
this girl's like whatever." Or if she had 500 followers, you're like, "Damn, I found a keeper." I it
yeah.
it's weird how society plays, but like, I don't think that's ever going to change
No,
because like it it's the way it is. It's almost like a currency. It's almost like a social status thing.
yeah.
But one of my biggest points was that now that I'm getting older, I don't have that fear of looking cool in front of someone else. I'm going to follow someone that I feel like I can gain value from.
Hmm.
um it's funny you opened this up with me like telling me about your interest in photography and stuff. I recently I got my hands on a DSLR, just learned like back in the fall. I wanted to learn how to use a camera. I've since started creating some b-roll style videos. Like
Hmm.
I'm really into the editing and the Photoshop. Like, I'm teaching all myself all this stuff, but
Yeah.
like, I'm not afraid to follow a local photographer or a local videographer or a local entrepreneur who's my age and he's trying to build something. And if they don't follow me back, that's fine, because
Yeah.
I know, like, by me following them, I'm getting perspective. I'm being a fly on the wall within their world. I,
Yeah.
I I think we need to start. I think once you make that realization as you get older, that's gonna benefit you in the long run versus being worried whether or not this girl thinks you're cool because you have 1,000 more followers than you have
Hmm.
following. Um, something I want to get your perspective on too is back to my point of being a valued student just because you're on the football team.
Mhm.
Was that much of a culture at York? Like
Oh,
being
yeah,
like being a celebrity, cutting the line at the bar, like getting all that
okay,
stuff.
so it's funny you mentioned the bar and the, I guess, like, the party life kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a little different at York, for a few reasons. Somewhere like FX or maybe even like Mac or Waterloo, the size of the campus isn't what York is. York has 60,000 students. Canadian college sports isn't the States. It's not gonna You're not gonna have that same kind of celebrity status like you
Yep.
would in the States.
Hmm.
If you're at a smaller school, maybe I wouldn't know, but at York it was so, you just kind of did your own thing. Like, we had
Sure.
our York football gear, and the basketball team had their gear, so you did recognize people when they'd wear it.
Yep.
But the campus being as big as it was, and the size of the student population, and York being a very big commuter school,
Mm,
there wasn't really like a celebrity status to it, kind of thing.
okay.
But the people that did know who we were, they would kind of act like we. So again, we such a big ratio between like the size of the league and how much popularity it has to the size of the campus. It
Hmm.
wasn't, but people thought that we were, and they would treat us differently when they would see us and meet us. So I remember talking to a couple girls on Tinder or just meeting them at a bar, whatever it is, and they've seen me around campus, and they'll
Yep.
talk to me and they'll be like, "I thought you were such an asshole before I met you," and I'm like, "What?" For like, based on what? And they're like, I don't know, just like, all the
You're
football
an
guys
athlete.
walk around
Yeah.
campus together,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
you're big, and like you kind of just have like a mean look on your face when you walk around. And I'm like, I've been up since 5 a.m. training. Like, I'm not really happy going to class. Like, that's not.
Holy shit.
I'm not
Holy
mad at
shit.
anyone. I'm just
It,
tired.
it's true. It's a huge. If you want the honest answer, that was a huge motivating factor in me creating Undress a Jersey because I went away for high school. I'm from Nova Scotia, moved to Vermont when I was 13 by
Oh, wow.
myself to do boarding school to play basketball. And so already I was kind of like, I didn't go to my local high school. So like all of my friends that I left in junior high, I would only be back once a year. Whenever I'm back, oh, Tristan's back, whatever.
Hmm.
And so I already had some of this, like, oh, he's the guy that went away for high school. He's this guy who's playing prep basketball. He's doing all this stuff. So I had a sense of that, and at the time I was dating a girl from home, so I was doing long distance,
Hmm.
and I would have conversations with her. I'd be like, especially when I was getting ready to go to Saint FX, where I was going to be introduced into that party culture and the
Yeah.
drinking and the girls and
Yeah.
that. I knew there was a stigma that was going to come along with that, and people were
Hmm.
going to only see me as the athlete, the
Yeah.
basketball player who treats girls badly, and they're making all these assumptions, and they don't even know who I am. So
Yeah.
so like like I believe in the power in the power of storytelling. You need to get to know someone before you like make all these assumptions. Like
Hmm.
the amount of shit now, it feels weird for me to even say this or even have this conversation with you because like I don't want to come off as a victim or whatever, but like there were nasty things said to me and said behind my back just because I was on the basketball team.
Hmm.
And I was like, how are you saying that? You don't even know my story.
Yeah.
So like you like dive into that. Like like did you experience anything like that too? Like or what are your thoughts on judging someone just because they're an athlete or you look mean or you're on the football team?
Um,
How do you combat that?
I mean, look, we can't really blame people for doing it, because like we do it every day with like celebrities, and you hear stuff on the news and you're like, oh, what a bitch. Like,
Hmm.
she's I like, we mentioned TikTok. Like, there was a whole thing about Charlie D'Amelio like almost getting 100 million followers, and then
She did, by the way. I checked.
did she?
I think she got it. Yeah.
She mentioned it, and someone said like, oh, like, you don't have enough already, and blah blah blah.
Hmm.
We do it all the time, so I don't blame people, but you absolutely have to know someone's story, right? Like, you can't just assume this person's a dick, this person
That's right.
they're selfish, whatever. You really have to get to know somebody. And funny enough, two of my closest friends right now, the first time I talked to them, they were both like so cold to me. It was crazy.
Mm,
And both of them
mm,
through football. One of them was in high school. One of my buddies so I started playing football in grade 10. The spring of grade 9, we had like a mini camp for like who was going to come to the tryout. The coaches wanted to get a little like sneak peek. And one of the guys comes up to me. He played the year before. He's like, "What's going on, man? Like, what position are you going to play?" And I was like, "Oh, I want to try out for tight end." And he looks at me. He's like, "It's taken." And I'm like, "Okay." This dude is my best friend in the whole world now.
holy shit.
The fact that he like, I was like, this guy's a fucking asshole, bro. Like,
Mm,
this guy's
mm.
such a piece of shit. But he's literally like, he's like my brother now. Like, we got so close, and just making the team and then getting close to that was awesome. And then in university, the same thing. The guy who I was in my second year, the rookie that came in, he was in the locker beside me, just starting conversation, first day training camp. "What's going on, man? Like, you nervous, whatever? What do you think you're going to run in the 40?" He's like 4'6", and he just like walks away. I'm like, what the? I didn't even do anything. Turns out he became one of my closest friends. Turns out he was like really like, he had like anxiety being the new guy on the team. Like,
Mm.
if I just was like, this guy's a dick, and I just didn't talk to him, like, who knows? Like, we probably wouldn't be as close as we are.
That's a great point. Like that's
So
why communication matters.
exactly. And I think that that's sports, but that goes for anything, right? Like a new person at work, you're on the street, like you hold the door open for someone, they don't say thank you. Like, yeah, that's a dick thing to do, but
Mm-hmm.
you never know, man. This person could be coming, they could be walking into the Tim's that you're holding the door for, coming from the hospital. They haven't slept all night because their loved one is in there. You never know, right? So it looks like athletes get all this special attention and we get the free gear and blah, 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 blah. But you don't know how many nights I skipped the party in high school to train to get that gear one day. You don't know how many times I've been injured that I had to come back from an injury where I couldn't walk for a month to get to this point. You never know. And that deserves a bit of respect. The same way I would never talk to a we call them civilians, like non-athletes. We call them
That's
civilians.
crazy. Jeez.
The
We narps.
No, literally the
Yeah,
same way I wouldn't. I'm gonna say it the same way I wouldn't treat a NARP any different for not being an athlete.
sure.
That person probably has a way better GPA than I did,
Sure.
and they probably made sacrifices to get there. So it's
But that takes a certain amount of understanding or
yeah.
empathy, like and that's, I think, is learned. I think you need to have a few of these shitty situations where
Hmm.
something tragic or traumatic, or even a couple of times where you slip up, where you judge someone prematurely, and then it turns out to bite you in the ass because that
Yeah.
person is so and so. Like it comes with experience, but the more I think even us just having this conversation and sharing the side of, we could get real deep on this, and I almost want to wrap this up soon, but
Yep.
like you could relate the same thing that we see today in the Black Lives Matter movement, or
Mhm.
any type of injustice, where it's important to see both sides, because I think that's a difficult conversation to have. Like for me to sit here and say, as the privileged white guy, that I have feelings too. Like there's so many different directions we could take this, but all I'm saying is it's super important to see both perspectives,
Mhm.
um, because the only way, like a huge message that I try to preach is the power of communication. And if I'm already closing the door with you without even, like, just because we don't look the same, or you don't think the same, if you can't close doors just because you don't think of the same way. Like,
Mhm.
by having conversations with people that are completely different than you, or may have a different view than you do, that's going to allow you to broaden your perspective, and you're going to take pieces from the different 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 conversations that you have.
Yeah.
That's important. Communication at the end of the day is important, and I don't think we do enough of it, because it it takes a little bit of humility, and it's not easy to talk to someone you've never talked to before. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm going to embarrass myself, or like I don't know what to say, or what if it's awkward, like that. Those aren't good feelings. It's
Yeah.
not easy to do that.
Yeah. And to tie it all back to sports, I think one of the reasons why I like am so grateful to have the experience of playing university football is because you're forced to do that. You meet people from every walk of
That's
life
right.
in the locker room, and you have to communicate with this person who you've never met, you've never
Mm,
had a conversation with, you know nothing about them. They are a completely different person than you. But that's the quarterback, and I need to communicate that a blitz
that's
is
right.
coming. It doesn't matter who he is.
That's right.
And then that just carries over to outside, out, like off the field, off the court, whatever it is. And that's how you learn it. And that's where football has given me the most. And I think where a lot of people will get the most from sports is we're not all going to make it to the pros, but you're going to gain
Hmm.
confidence. You're going to gain communication skills from playing in your sport, especially at such a high level.
It's true. You learn to read energy. You learn to mesh with people you've never met. Like in tryouts, you have to literally coordinate with someone you don't know in order to reach a common goal. Like I just I don't know if I would be the kind of communicator or uh, people person that I like to believe that I am without playing sports.
Hmm.
And it helps me when those conversations with, like, it helps me in the situations like you saw in Black Lives Matter, in order to express or even have uncomfortable conversations with family members who don't, like, aren't getting the important things. And it just helps you stand up for something, or it helps you express ideas. And I listen to a ton of Joe Rogan.
Hmm.
um, and his most recent one is with the co-founder of Whole Foods, and they go into capitalism and all this kind of stuff. But one thing that they said just before I hopped on with you was that ideas, like, you have to get to a point, or it's important to get to a point in your life where you start to, like, where you separate yourself from your ideas, because ideas come and go and
Hmm.
they don't define you. What this guy said, he's like, think of ideas as like clothes. These are the clothes I'm wearing today, but
Hmm.
tomorrow I'm going to put on new clothes. And just like your ideas, an idea that I have today can change or be different tomorrow than it was today. And I think, the ideas that you have are only influences of what you surround yourself with. and
Hmm.
and just, if you have an idea or a belief or something that you say and I don't agree with that, I can hate that idea, but that doesn't mean I hate you, right? And until we get to that place as a society, I think we're still going to have this disconnect.
Yeah.
um, Nick, anything you want to leave out here on the table as we wrap up here?
No, I think this is awesome. I love the style of podcast that you're doing. This is great. I remember when I wanted to get into podcasting, something like this was something I thought would
Mhm.
like was needed. And especially for Canadian sports too, like having like a face to put to the player on the field that you might see at school one day. Like I think that's awesome. I think this is the
Mhm.
kind of thing that can grow into being such a big podcast that can give Canadian sports,
Mhm.
Canadian university sports, more credit and more recognition, because people put a lot of emphasis and a lot of focus on the states for their athletics, but we
Sure.
have great athletes here too. And I think what you're doing
True.
here is can help push that in the right direction for Canadian sports. So I think this whole podcast is awesome.
Well, bro, I really appreciate that. If you're ever looking for a guest for the Gut Hut, I'm down. I'm down to kick it with the guys.
Yeah.
Have a couple brewskis.
Yeah.
Of course, when the pandemic's over. I mean, now we're
Yeah.
stuck in lockdown again. But
Yep.
bro, I'm just excited for two things. I'm excited that I got to connect with you and hear a little bit about your journey, um, but more importantly, like, your perspective, who you are as a guy. Like, I can tell you're a dude, you're a bro,
Yeah.
you're hype. Um, but secondly, thank you for coming on here, to, saying yes to that random invitation, that random DM.
Hmm.
And like I said, I'm excited to follow your podcast, listen to it while I make my eggs, laugh, crack jokes in the group chat, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Is like putting a smile on someone, like by you telling stories, it's going to make me connect to stories I've been through.
Hmm.
And like it's a circle effect. It's all connected in some way. Absolutely love it. And yeah, keep it up, bro.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll definitely be hitting you up for a special guest appearance one day.
I
That'd be awesome.
appreciate that. All right, Nick, take care. Take care,
Yeah,
my
you
man.
too.
All right, bro.
Nick Voci, York football. You were just watching Undress the Jersey.